Hello, this is Sonia here from The Pretty Stitch. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for joining me. Usually I do videos about crocheting and I have different stitch pattern tutorials. I have actual patterns of things that you can make, and they're, I have a whole bunch of different playlists of different crochet patterns that you can do, stitch tutorials, how to crochet, etc. But today we are going to do something different. I have talked in the past about I know how to knit, and I consider myself a crocheter that also knits. My knitting skills are nowhere near my crocheting skills, but I do like knitting as well. So today, I think I talked about it before, and I've kind of been a bit nervous about doing it, but I'm going to do a knitting video today. So any of you that are really experienced knitters, please be gentle, please be kind, because I'm probably doing some things wrong, but we'll see what happens. What I have in front of me is a cable needle. And I love doing cables in knitting. I actually find them to be easier than crochet cables. I can do both, but I just think actually knitting cables are easier. And if you do not have a cable needle, you can certainly use a crochet hook, which I have done before. So one like this would actually work fine. This is an F hook, 3.75 millimeter, whatever you can find on hand. But I actually do have a cable needle right here. And for this project, we are going to be using size 10 knitting needles. So here we go. And I just have, these kind circular ones, but you can certainly use straight needles, works perfectly fine as well. And these are size 10 knitting needles. And we are going to be using 2 strands of worsted held together. So if you do have chunkier, bulkier yarn, then you wouldn't need to use 2 strands, or like that popular blanket yarn would be really great for this project. And we are going to be making an ear warmer. And this yarn that I'm using, it's actually, I want to show you the label. It's called Patton's Jenny. And what is really funny is it says cotton style, but then when you look on the other side and see what it's made out of, 97% acrylic and 3% nylon. No cotton to be found. So this yarn I think is quite old. I'm not exactly sure how old it is. It's in my stash, and also if you're new, I've been trying to do a destashing of my yarn. I have so much yarn, so I do have some videos showing the the enormous amounts of yarn that I have. So I can certainly link some below if you're interested in seeing them. So yes, this is in one of the yarn bins that I found. So to start off, you can we're going to cast on 16. So I'm going to do my version of a cable cast on. I know this isn't correct, but this was actually how my grandmother taught me how to cast on, and I learned how to do this probably when I was like 8 years old. And my grandmother loved to knit. She, I think, knitted to relax herself, but I don't want to criticize my grandmother. I love my grandmother. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman, but I don't think she was a super skilled knitter. I think she just knitted basically to relax. She loved knitting slippers. We would often get slippers for Christmas, and she basically kind of just did like the garter knit stitch because that was the only stitch that she taught me. And I wanted her to teach me other things, but I think that was probably either she knew how to do other things, but just, didn't really want to be bothered because she was a nurse and she was very, very busy. So I think she just, knitted to relax and, loved making her slippers, and that was good. She just stayed in that lane, and that's quite all right. But I had wanted to learn more, and it took me years to learn more. Knitting, I'm not as good at as crocheting. But anyway, this is how she showed me how to cast on. So, I put and I like casting on this method. You can do long tail cast on. You can cast on however you wish. I like this way because then no yarn is wasted. So I insert my needle in here. I have my yarn. So yarn, and then I pull it through, and then I give it a little twist and then pull it over like that. So again, maybe that's an actual cast on, I have no idea, but that's how I learned. And so if there is an actual name of that, then please let me know. Now cable cast on, I believe you stick the needle in between and do it, but to me, again, I didn't learn that way. It's kind of awkward and weird for me. My grandmother taught me to actually stick the needle in the stitch, and that's how I prefer to do it. And it's probably all kinds of wrong, so again, experienced knitters, be kind, be gentle. And then I pull it and then just give it a twist and stick it on. It doesn't affect the look of the ear warmer, so you know, it's okay. As I've already made one and it turned out really cute. So again, yeah, I just stick my needles right in there. I think because I'm a crocheter, so I'm used to like sticking my hook in a stitch, so in between just, I don't know, doesn't work for me. So I'm going to keep going and cast on my 16 stitches here. Alright, so I have casted on my 16 stitches here. So I said before, you know, you can do it my like weird way that actually might be a real way of like my version of cable cast on, or you can really do the real cable cast on or long tail, however you want to cast on your stitches, you know, go for it. So we have 16 on here. So our first row is just a knit row, and I do know how to knit continental, which is, I know everybody says if you're a crocheter you like to knit continental, but I'm going to throw, because I find that I have a little bit more control when I'm doing it this way. And I sometimes will knit continental, it just depends on the project. Usually when I'm doing cables, I will not knit continental, I will throw, because again, I feel like I have more control. So yes, it affects the speed, but you know, or I will do a combination of both. So I will do like I can purl continental, but I feel really bad at it. I think I'm really slow at it, and I know they'll say you'll get faster, but I think because I'm not left-handed. So I think that's what it is. I'm not left-handed. And so I just feel clumsy. Alright, so we're almost done this first row here. So super easy. Just knit all the way across your 16 stitches. And you can make this as long as you need. So this is really a custom fit ear warmer, so you can make it for, you know, any size head shape, it will work. All right, so now we're going to work on, sorry for the clanking, row 2. And row 2 we're just purling. All right, so now we're ready for row 3. This is the cable part. So the cables, usually when you're doing cables, there's purl stitches in between, but we're not doing that. It's all going to be knit row with the cables, and I just wanted that because I just kind of wanted the cables to look a little bit more seamless instead of the defining, here's the cable, here's the purl. And there's nothing wrong with that, but for this particular pattern, I just kind of wanted it. That was just the look I was going for. So what we're going to do is you're going to take your cable needle, and the braided cable is going to be worked over 6 stitches, but for each time we're cabling, we're working over 4, but it will be a total of 6. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to take 2 stitches off to start my cable row here. And I'm referring to these as, I'm going to call it cable front or cable back. I know some it's like cable left, cable right. Like, I find that to be confusing. I don't know. I don't know my rights from my left, I guess. At least in knitting. Knitting is still, it's a huge learning curve for me. So I just find when I'm cabling, like, do I hold the needle in the front or do I hold it in the back? So this, I'm just going to say cable front, 2 in the front, and call it a day. So we are cabling front here, and now we're going to knit 2 stitches. Yep, make sure you have your yarn in the right place there. That's always helpful. So yeah, you're probably cringing if you are like this really amazing knitter and be like, why is this girl have this video because she's terrible. Okay, so we've knitted those 2 stitches. Now we need to knit these 2 off of our needle here. And of course, like, this stitch got really nice and tight, but you know what? We're gonna get it off there. So yeah, if you had a little bit of a larger needle, it might be a little bit easier, especially in the beginning rows too. It can get a little tricky, and then you're working with 2 yarns, but you know what? It shakes itself out eventually. Okay. Alright, so we've got those 2 knitted off, so we're going to continue to knit across to the last 6 stitches. So you're just going to knit the 4 here. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, no, we're not done yet. So you're going to do the 4 stitch cabling, and then you will, I guess because I say knitting 4, but there are still 2 more stitches you need to knit because you're not going to be cabling over 6 stitches for this braided cable, but the cable itself is made up of 6 stitches. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, I'm a bit of a mess with knitting. This is my first knitting video ever, so please bear with me. Alright, so now we're at 6 stitches here, and we're going to do the same thing as we did in the beginning. So you're going to take these 2 stitches off and cable front. Hold that guy in front, knit the next 2. So for you experienced knitters, you know, this is probably really easy for you, and I think this is a pretty fast project. You should be able to whip through it pretty quickly, and I like those projects, I mean, especially with knitting for me, because it takes me so much longer to knit, and sometimes I get discouraged, especially if I'm making something larger, like a sweater. I mean, it's just going to take me forever, where I could bang out a crochet sweater, you know, maybe in a few days if I had enough time. Whoops, and it flew off my needle. So as you can see, hot mess knitter, the stitches flew right off the needle, but crisis averted. I was able to rescue them, because I find fixing knitting really, really difficult. Fixing crochet is so much easier for me. Fixing knitting, sometimes I've literally just taken whole projects apart and started over. But I was able to rescue these guys. So now we're just going to knit the last 2. And that very painful row 3 is complete. So there we go. Doesn't look like much right now, but it will start taking shape, and we'll get ready for row 4. Okay, so after we've finished row 3, row 4 is going to be a purling row. So you're just going to purl for row 4. So all even rows will be a purl row. And these always untwist, so this is not the best set here, circular needle set, but it you know, it works fine. So I'm going to purl across, and then I will meet you back for row 5. Alright, so I have finished row 4. So now we're going to begin row 5. So row 5, you're just going to knit the first 2 stitches. And now we're going to work the second part of our braided cable here. So we are going to get our handy dandy cable needle here and put 2 stitches on there. And these are cable back, so this is going to go in the back. So we have cable front, cable back. So now we're going to knit these 2 guys. So this is part of the 6 stitch cable of the braid. But yet you're working only 2 But once you do a couple rows in, then the braid really starts to take shape. Just takes a little bit of time. At first, to me, it's kind of like, is it working? Am I doing it right? But then after you get going, then you're like, oh, it's looking okay. So now we're knitting off the stitches on our cable needle. And now we're going to continue to knit across to our last 4 stitches. Alright, so now we have 4 stitches, so we're going to grab our cable needle again, finish up this row. So pull these guys off. Didn't have my light on, sorry about that. So now we're going to hold these in the back, so we're cabling back. And we're going to knit these guys off. Sometimes working with 2 yarns together is a little challenging because you don't want to miss one. Alright, so now we have to knit these guys off of the cable needle. And then row 5 is complete. And there we go, there's row 5, so you can start to see it a little bit. So now row 6, we're just going to purl, and then you're going to repeat rows 3 through 6 until your ear warmer is long enough to fit comfortably around your head. And I usually like to end on row 3. That's just my personal preference. So I'm going to continue working rows 3 through 6, and then I will show you what she's looking like. Alright, so I have finished knitting my ear warmer here, so you can see. And now we need to attach it so we can turn this into an actual circle. So the length of my ear warmer is about 21 inches. It fits comfortably around my head, and I have a very small head, so you might need to knit a few more rows. It's completely up to you. So now we need to turn this guy into a circle. So what you could do is you could just bind off and then sew the ends together like that, and then turn it right side out, and you've got your ear warmer. So I came up with a way to kind of bind off and knit these guys together at the same time. Maybe there is a technique, I have no idea. Again, I consider myself a crocheter that can knit, sort of. So you might find this technique to be completely horrible, or just like, what is she doing? She has no idea what she's doing. So you can, you know, keep those negative thoughts to yourself. I'll show you what I do, and you might think it's terrible. Now I'm going to use a double pointed needle because I have these aren't the best circular needles, and this one, it's just flopping all over and getting on my nerves. So you might hear it clanking around down there. So I'm just going to grab this double pointed needle to kind of make my life a little easier. So I have my right sides touching, and I'm just going to attach these together and bind them off at the same time. So what I do is, since we're working a purl row here, so I'm going to stick my other needle at the end of my row 1 and purlwise here like that. And then I'm just going to simply purl this first stitch on my actual row, like so. And then I just take these guys here and just bind them off. So this might actually be a technique, I really don't know. I'm not, as I said, I'm not very skilled with knitting. It's not that I don't want to learn. I just get a little, it took me a couple of years to just figure out the basics of knitting, so for me to learn more, it'll probably take me a lot more years. Crocheting, I just, it clicked with me right away. But my grandmother was a knitter, and I have really fond memories of her knitting, and so I just really, you know, kind of to honor her and just want to learn. I love all the yarn crafts. All right, so I'm just going to keep going. So I inserted my hook, and I'm just going to go in here, purl, so now I'm going to bind off, make sure I have this stitch here, and then I have to do this one too. And I'm just going to keep on going. So picking up a stitch, finding that next stitch, purling, bind off, so you're like binding off twice and binding off again. And so see, now you can see those guys, we're starting to attach her. And it's just because I want to avoid sewing. That's the only reason. And I have done this before. I think it looks fine. Oops, there's a hair there. And there we go. So I'm just going to keep going across, working around across here, and binding off my stitches, and I will meet you back. So if you want to give this technique, maybe, you know, this train wreck technique of a try, you know, certainly feel free. Or just, again, you know, use your own technique, whatever you think is best. I mean, I know there's like Kitchener stitch or something, and maybe that could be something that could work, but I looked at that, it just looked so complicated and hard. It just kind of made my head hurt, so I was like, you know what, I can't learn this right now. And especially, you know, my husband died a couple months ago, so sometimes it's really hard for me. I've had to learn so many new things because, you know, I'm a single homeowner now and single mom, and it just, anything else, sometimes some other things that are new, it's so overwhelming for me. So I kind of need to keep things a little bit simple. So I'm going to keep going, working off these stitches, and I will meet you back. Alright, so I have finished up here binding off my stitches in my crazy weird bind off way. Again, you do whatever, however you would like to bind off. If you want to just bind off like normal and then sew it, you know, if this is just looks horrible to you, then, you know, don't do my method. Or maybe this is an actual method, I really don't know. But I finished. I'm going to cut my yarn here. And then I'll turn her right side out so you can see. No, I don't think it looks too bad, and you could always stick some buttons or something on there. Actually, I might do that. And here is my little ear warmer, or that could just be the back of it. And so you'll need to just finish up weaving in your ends, and then you're good to go. It does curl a little bit, but once it's on your head, you know, I think it's going to be fine. I do think it's super cute. I'll probably get a lot of use out of it this winter. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and I thank you so much for watching.